I trusted my sibling with everything. My heart, my secrets, even my future. Then I found out they stole $35,000 in my name. And when I turned to my family for help, they took their side. I was sitting in the fluorescent stillness of a car dealership when my world cracked. The salesperson smiled like he was about to offer me a deal. My then-boyfriend Tyler was scrolling through his phone, halfway humming a song he didn't know the words to. And I was hopeful. Nervous but hopeful. A new car meant I was finally stepping into a stable season of life. A symbol that I was moving forward. Healing. Choosing me. Then the man across the desk slid the paper toward me like it was just paperwork. Like it wasn't a grenade. "Is this correct?" he asked. I looked down. The numbers didn't make sense. A $35,000 personal loan with a monthly payment I didn't recognize and a note. Current balance. $33,782. I blinked. This can't be right. He offered a polite, practiced nod. "It came up on your credit report. Says it was opened 18 months ago." That's when everything blurred. I remember the pressure behind my eyes, the way the air thinned out, the sudden pounding in my ears. Tyler looked at me like I had some explaining to do. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. All I could do was stare at the numbers and feel my brain scrambling to make them mean something else. Anything else. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my apartment with my laptop open and my legs numb, calling every number I could find. One robotic voicemail after another. Finally, someone from the loan company answered. I gave them my name, my SSN, my address. The man on the line hesitated. Then said, "I can email you the documents." And when they arrived, it felt like someone reached into my chest and yanked something out. There was my name, my social security number, my signature, except it wasn't mine. I hadn't signed anything. The email address listed belonged to my brother, Nathan. I stared at it for hours. Not just in shock but in betrayal that felt physical. My hands trembled. My teeth ached. My body didn't know what to do with this kind of information. It didn't just feel like someone had taken money. It felt like someone had stripped away the boundary between who I was and what I was worth. And sold it. I didn't cry at first. I went still. Completely still. Like I'd left my own body. Then came the shaking. The hyperventilating. The questions that wouldn't stop echoing. Why would he do this? How long has he been planning this? Did Mom know? I didn't sleep for 72 hours. My mind kept rewinding to moments I hadn't questioned before. Like that time I'd asked Mom to drop off some old tax folders at my place and she said Nathan had already picked them up. Or when he jokingly said, "One day you'll save us all." I'd laughed. We always laughed. But now I wasn't sure if it was ever a joke. By the third night I'd memorized the loan ID number. I'd Googled identity theft by family so many times that the search engine kept autofilling it before I finished typing. I stopped answering texts. I turned off my phone altogether. Because if someone as close as Nathan could violate me like this, how was I supposed to trust anyone? Tyler tried for a day or two to be comforting. But even he began looking at me differently. Like I was the problem. Like somehow I'd caused this. I kept staring at that credit report, the way the paper looked when it was first handed to me. Too bright under the lights, too sharp at the corners. I still remember the texture. How cold it felt in my hands. It wasn't just numbers. It was evidence. A confession disguised as a financial document. That paper broke something open in me. And the pieces weren't just financial. They were personal. Intimate. Sacred. Because money wasn't the only thing Nathan stole. He stole my ability to feel safe. And that would take more than a good credit score to repair. I didn't confront him right away. I couldn't. Every time I tried to type out a message or rehearse what I'd say, my body shut down. My chest would tighten. My fingers would go numb. It was like my nervous system was trying to protect me from knowing the full weight of the truth. Instead, I started tracing the timeline in my head, trying to piece together when the lie began. I remembered visiting Mom's house the year before, digging through the storage closet looking for my college transcripts, and noticing that my old tax documents were missing. Nathan needed some paperwork, she'd said casually, pouring tea like it meant nothing. At the time, I didn't even flinch. Why would I? He was my brother. He'd always borrowed things. My headphones, my hoodie, even my laptop once. I never thought he'd borrow my future. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how long this had been building. It wasn't just about the stolen loan. It was about the slow erosion of boundaries that I'd ignored because it came from someone I loved. Someone who, at one point, felt like my twin in everything but age. Growing up, Nathan was always reckless. The kind of reckless that was framed as charm. He'd speed through school zones and somehow talk his way out of tickets. Borrow money and forget to pay it back, then joke that he was bad with numbers. He could be careless, selfish, irresponsible, but Mom would just laugh and say, "That's Nathan. He'll figure it out." I was the one who wasn't allowed to mess up. The straight-A student. The planner. The one who paid her bills on time and brought reusable bags to the grocery store. When Nathan forgot rent, I wired him $800. When he called crying about car repairs, I sent him $5,000. That's the part that still makes me sick. How much of his mess I cleaned up without even asking why it was mine to fix. Back then I called it love. Now I call it manipulation dressed up in family loyalty. What gutted me wasn't just that he'd used my information. It was how easily he did it. The forged signature looked practiced. The email address he used had been created months before the loan was taken out. He had prepared for this. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. And it worked because I trusted him to never cross that line. I finally told Tyler. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, half listening, scrolling through a sports forum on his phone. When I said it, Nathan took out a loan in my name. He barely looked up. Just blinked. Then said, "That's crazy. You sure it wasn't a mistake or something?" That was when I realized I was in this alone. No one was coming to rescue me. Not my boyfriend. Not my family. Not even the legal system, not quickly anyway. Because when the thief has your blood and your last name, people treat it like a family dispute, not a crime. The first lawyer I called said, "You might want to try resolving this privately before getting the courts involved. Prosecutors don't like going after siblings unless it's severe." Unless it's severe? What else did they need? Blood. The anxiety began to settle into my bones. I stopped eating properly. Coffee replaced sleep. I checked my credit report every day like it was a heartbeat monitor. My body stayed in fight or flight mode, even in silence. I started jumping when I got emails. I'd delete them before reading. What if it was another charge? Another account? Another betrayal? And yet I still hadn't told Nathan I knew. Because deep down I wanted to believe there had to be some explanation. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe someone else used his Wi-Fi. Maybe he didn't realize what he was doing. Maybe I was wrong. But I wasn't. And I knew it. And the only thing worse than knowing the truth was knowing how many people would try to convince me not to see it. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just stab you, it makes you question whether you're bleeding at all. I didn't plan the phone call. It wasn't a dramatic build-up, no pacing across the floor or pep talk in the mirror. It just happened. One afternoon after another sleepless night I saw his name light up on my screen. I hadn't told him yet. I hadn't even hinted that I knew. But there he was, calling like everything was normal. Like he hadn't burned down the one person who never asked him for anything in return. I let it ring twice. My thumb hovered over the red button. But something in me shifted. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe it was anger, maybe I just needed to hear how he'd lie. I answered. "Hey sis," he said, cheerful, like he was calling to tell me about a movie he'd just watched. "You got a sec?" I couldn't say hi. My throat locked. I just said, flat and cold, "I saw the credit report, Nathan." There was silence. Not the shocked kind. Not the kind that comes from getting caught. It was calculation. I could hear the wheels turning. Then, as if this was just some harmless mix-up, he laughed. "Oi, you mean that loan thing? That's what this is about. That loan thing." Like he'd borrowed a jacket and forgot to return it. My fingers trembled, but my voice came out steady. Too steady. "You forged my signature. You used my social. You opened an account pretending to be me." Still, he didn't apologize. No shame. No remorse. Just a shrug through the phone. "Look, you always bounce back. You've got your stuff together. I needed help and you wouldn't have given it if I asked. So I did what I had to." I almost dropped the phone. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly but definitively. Like a frozen lake beginning to split beneath your feet. It wasn't just what he did. It was how casually he justified it. He knew exactly who I was, responsible, loyal, the fixer of everyone's mess, and he used that image like a weapon. He gambled on me staying silent. On me loving him more than I loved myself. "Nathan, you stole from me," I said slowly because I needed to hear it out loud. "You used me. And you didn't even flinch." He sighed like I was being dramatic. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You've got a good job, a good life. I'm struggling. Isn't that what family's for?" That line. That manipulative, guilt-wrapped line. I'd heard it before. At family dinners, in whispered phone calls from Mom whenever he needed help again. But now it felt poisoned. I could finally see it for what it was. Family isn't for stealing from the one person who always showed up. His voice sharpened. "So what, you're gonna press charges? Drag me through court? Ruin the family over this?" And there was the real threat. Not just the crime but the pressure to pretend it wasn't one. Because telling the truth in our family was always seen as betrayal. Not the act itself. No, that was forgivable. But speaking it out loud? That's what made you the enemy. I didn't answer him. I just ended the call. Then I sat there for a long time holding the phone in my lap, staring at the floor like it could offer answers. I felt hollow. Not fiery, not vindicated. Just empty. The kind of emptiness that comes when the person you love turns into a stranger and still expects you to hug them like nothing's changed. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I pulled out my laptop, opened a document, and started listing everything. Dates, transactions, the email trail, screenshots of the loan correspondence. If no one else would protect me, I'd have to learn how to protect myself. That night, I ordered a lockbox, froze my credit, and looked up lawyers in another city, just in case. I didn't tell Mom. I didn't tell anyone. I needed to know without a doubt who would stand beside me once the truth came out. Because I wasn't just preparing for a legal battle. I was preparing for war with my own blood. I waited 3 days before telling my mother. I kept rehearsing the words in my head, as if I could land the perfect combination that would finally make her see me, not just as her daughter, but as someone who had been wronged. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just hurt. Truthfully hurt. I chose a Sunday. She was always calmer on Sundays. Church in the morning, grocery shopping in the afternoon, and if I timed it just right, just after dinner, I might catch her before her walls went up. She picked up on the second ring. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice warm like nothing in our world had shifted. "I was just thinking about you. How's work?" I didn't let her small talk distract me. "Mom, I need to tell you something. It's serious." That one sentence made her pause. I could feel her spine straighten through the phone. "What is it?" "Nathan stole $35,000 using my name. He forged documents. He took out a loan in my identity. I found out when my car loan application was denied. There's proof." Silence. Not gasping. Not concern. Just stillness. Like she was waiting for a different version of the story, one that wouldn't force her to choose. Finally she said, "There must be some mistake. Nathan wouldn't do that to you." I swallowed hard. "It's not a mistake. I have the credit report, the forged signature, the address he used. It was all from your house. My old tax forms. He used them." More silence. But this time it wasn't quiet, it was heavy. Heavy with denial, with old habits. With fear that the perfect image she clung to might shatter if she looked too closely. When she finally spoke, her voice dropped an octave. "You sure you didn't co-sign it and forget? You've always helped him. Maybe you just didn't remember." I felt something in my chest fold in on itself. "You think I'd forget $35,000? That's not what I meant," she said quickly. He's your brother. He's had a hard life. You know how he struggles. He didn't mean to hurt you." There was the script I knew by heart. The excuses, the softening of his actions. The immediate pivot from what he did to why he must have had a reason. "I'm the one who's been hurt," I said, barely holding my voice steady. "He used me. He didn't even apologize. He told me I'd bounce back like it didn't matter." She sighed. "You've always been strong. He's not. He's made mistakes, but he's family. And family forgives." I wanted to scream. Dad, I sat very still. I realized then that this wasn't just about Nathan. It never had been. It was about a family system built on looking away. A pattern of blaming the one who speaks the truth, not the one who creates the mess. "I'm not going to forgive this," I said. "Not this time." She didn't respond. I heard her breathing, slow and uncertain. Then, "Please don't ruin everything over this. Don't call the police. We can handle this quietly. Just you and me." But there was no "just you and me" anymore. That had ended the second she asked me to protect him instead of myself. I realized I wasn't just fighting for money. I was fighting for my right to name what was done to me. And that, in this family, was the greatest offense of all. "I'm going to fix my credit. I've already frozen my accounts. And yes, I'm talking to a lawyer. I don't want to, but I have to." She whispered like someone mourning a version of me she preferred. "I raised you better than this." I laughed, bitter and quiet. "No, you raised me to stay quiet. I'm the one choosing better now." I ended the call. I sat alone afterward, surrounded by old photos in frames I hadn't touched in years. One of them was from my high school graduation, Nathan had his arms slung around my shoulder, grinning like we shared a secret. Maybe we did back then. But not anymore. Now the secret was mine. And for the first time I wasn't hiding it. It didn't feel like a dramatic decision. No slammed doors. No screaming. Just a quiet clarity that settled over me like dust. After I hung up the phone with my mother, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the floor. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just knew I couldn't stay here anymore. The house smelled like lavender dryer sheets and disappointment. I had moved back in after college to save money, telling myself it was temporary. But temporary had stretched into years. Into dinners where Nathan would show up uninvited, spin stories that made no sense, and walk out with leftovers and whatever money mom had tucked into her purse, just in case. Into birthdays where my accomplishments were barely mentioned, and his unpaid parking tickets were a family crisis. Into a quiet agreement that I would be the glue while he got to be the fire. I stood up and opened the closet. There wasn't much I needed. A few work outfits. The folder with my financial records. The books I'd kept since high school, because they reminded me I once dreamed bigger than this. I found a cardboard box under my bed and started folding things neatly. I didn't want to leave chaos behind. That was always Nathan's thing. Storms and messes and someone else to clean them up. I wouldn't do that. I wasn't leaving in anger. I was leaving in self-respect. Around midnight I walked downstairs and stood in the kitchen for a long moment. The lights were off. The only glow came from the refrigerator's clock. I looked around like I was trying to memorize the room. The old mug rack near the sink, the drawer that always jammed, the tile that had been cracked since 2003. I'd once thought I would raise kids in a house like this. A quiet home with framed memories and the smell of cinnamon in winter. But that dream didn't belong here anymore. Not in a place where betrayal sat at the dinner table unchallenged and fed. I left a note on the counter. Nothing dramatic, just a line that said, "I need space. I'll be okay. Please don't call." I meant the last part. I couldn't do another conversation where I was expected to forgive what hadn't even been acknowledged. I drove to a friend's apartment on the other side of the city. It was barely furnished. A mattress on the floor, 2 chairs, a coffee table missing a leg. But it felt like safety. She didn't ask questions when I arrived. Just handed me a blanket, made tea, and let me sit in silence. That night I didn't sleep much. My mind kept cycling through everything. What if Nathan retaliated? What if mom showed up? What if I was overreacting? But somewhere in that chaos, another voice spoke. One I hadn't heard in years. It said, "You did the right thing." And for the first time I believed it. In the morning I texted my boss and asked for 2 personal days. Then I printed out a copy of my credit report and stared at the numbers again. Cold, factual, undeniable. $35,000 of betrayal. In black ink on white paper. It looked like debt, but it felt like a scar. I started researching lawyers. I didn't know where to begin, so I Googled identity theft sibling help. Most articles talked about strangers. Almost none talked about family. It made me feel both alone and strangely resolved. If no one else wanted to speak about it, I would. I also froze my credit. Called the banks. Filed a report with the FTC. Every action made my hands shake, but I did it anyway. Each step felt like building a wall. Something solid between me and the people who told me to keep quiet. Between me and the version of myself who would have stayed. By evening I'd built a tiny fortress out of phone calls and paperwork. It wasn't much. But it was mine. And for the first time in a long time no one could take it from me. The strange thing about betrayal is that it doesn't shout. It whispers. It seeps into your bones slowly, asking questions you're too exhausted to answer. Was I too controlling? Did I miss a sign? Maybe if I'd helped him one more time this wouldn't have happened. That first week in my friend's apartment, I wasn't just grieving what Nathan did. I was dismantling the version of myself that let it happen. The responsible one. The fixer. The daughter who didn't complain. I had worn those titles like armor for so long, I didn't know who I was without them. I kept thinking about the night he stole my future and turned it into numbers on a loan application. Somewhere in a dimly lit room he used my name like a key and walked through a door that never should have been his. And I still couldn't stop wondering, did he even hesitate? I started therapy on a rainy Thursday. My hands trembled filling out the intake form. Not because I was scared to talk, but because I was scared I'd sound crazy. How do you explain to someone that you trusted your brother with your life, and he used your social security number instead? Dr. Keller had warm eyes and didn't flinch when I told her the whole story. She didn't ask why I hadn't pressed charges yet. She didn't ask why I had once given Nathan $5,000 for a car repair that I later found out went straight into a casino ATM. Instead, she said something that cut through me like glass. "Survivors often confuse responsibility with love," she said. "But love isn't sacrifice. Love is mutual accountability." I sat there stunned. Because in my family, love always looked like sacrifice. My mother gave up her career to care for us, and Nathan used that to justify his failure. I gave up my peace to hold the family together, and they called it loyalty. But no one ever gave up anything for me. That night, I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. "I am not responsible for fixing what I didn't break." I underlined it 3 times. Then I wrote it again. I started to track my thoughts like Dr. Keller taught me. Each time the guilt crept in, I wrote down the lie and then the truth. Lie, you should have seen it coming. Truth, he lied to your face. Lie, you overreacted. Truth, he stole $35,000. Lie, you broke the family. Truth, they chose silence. The journaling helped, but the triggers were everywhere. Emails made my chest tighten. Unknown numbers made me feel hunted. One afternoon, a letter came from the loan company addressed to me with a bold red past due stamp across the top. I held it like it might explode. My friend offered to open it for me, but I needed to do it myself. Inside was another reminder of the weight Nathan had shoved onto my back. Minimum payment due. Interest piling up. Legal action pending. I took a deep breath, folded the letter, and slid it into a folder marked evidence. I was done pretending it didn't exist. I spent hours researching financial recovery. Learned how to build an emergency fund, how to write debt dispute letters, how to pull a full credit report without penalties. It became almost a ritual. Coffee in one hand, truth in the other. Rebuilding my life wasn't glamorous. It was slow, awkward, and lonely. But each step forward felt like a rebellion against the story they tried to write for me. And yet, part of me still hoped for an apology. From Nathan. From my mother. From someone. Not because I needed them to make it right, but because it would mean they saw me. Understood what this had cost. But the silence stayed. And in that silence I started to hear my own voice again. Not the girl who bent herself into shapes to make others comfortable. Not the woman who bailed out everyone else and called it love. But someone new. Someone clear-eyed and tired but steady. Someone building a life out of truth. And that truth was simple. I wasn't the problem. I was just finally refusing to carry one. It wasn't supposed to go like that. I had rehearsed the conversation in my head 100 times. Sometimes calm, sometimes furious, sometimes trembling but brave. In none of those versions did he laugh. I called Nathan on a Tuesday evening just after sunset. The sky was soft and purple like it was trying to calm me. My fingers hovered over the screen before I finally hit call. My heart raced. My therapist had warned me this might not give me closure. But I needed truth. Even a broken one. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hey," he said casually, like I'd just called to talk about dinner plans. I didn't bother with small talk. "I know about the loan, Nathan. The $35,000. I saw the paperwork. I saw my name, my social security number. You forged it." There was a pause. I heard him exhale like I'd just said something mildly annoying. "Oh, that," he said. "That." Like it was a parking ticket. Like he hadn't detonated a bomb in my life. "Use my name. You forged my signature. You stole my future." Still no apology. Just silence. Then a chuckle. A low, dismissive laugh. "Come on, you always bounce back," he said. "It's not like you're struggling. You've always had your life together." That's when the numbness left my body. My voice didn't shake. It sharpened. "That's not the point, Nathan. You lied. You broke every shred of trust one had in you. And you didn't even think I deserved to know." He sighed like I was exhausting. "Why are you making this a big deal? I was gonna pay it off eventually." "No, you weren't. And we both knew it." He never even made a single payment. The debt was growing every day, burying me in consequences he'd never feel. Then he said the thing that scorched whatever was left inside me. "You've always been the strong one. I thought you could handle it." That wasn't a compliment. That was a sentence. A life sentence he'd handed me the day he decided I was the responsible one, the one who'd absorb the damage so he wouldn't have to feel it. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't try to educate him on what this had done to me. I just said, I'm done. And I hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time. Not because I expected him to call back, but because some part of me was mourning a person who never really existed. The version of Nathan I believed in, the brother I thought I had. That night, I packed what little I had in my suitcase. I left a thank you note for my friend and drove 4 hours in silence, landing in a rental on the outskirts of Denver. I needed space, distance, air that didn't carry the weight of our childhood. I didn't tell my mother I was leaving until I was already gone. When I finally did, she cried on the phone. Said I was being harsh. That Nathan was going through a phase. That family forgives. No, I told her quietly. Family protects. Family takes responsibility. Family doesn't steal from you and then expect you to smile through the wreckage. She didn't answer. Just whispered, but he's your brother. I hung up without another word. Because I finally understood, I wasn't just confronting Nathan. I was confronting a system. A family culture where silence was loyalty and sacrifice was expected from the strong one. That night I blocked them both. And for the first time in months I slept. Not well. But without checking my credit score first. Without flinching at every email. Without waiting for someone to swoop in and fix what they broke. The healing hadn't started. Not really. But something else had. A lying. A boundary. A refusal. I would no longer carry what wasn't mine. I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't the fixer. I was the one who walked away. The air in Denver felt different. It wasn't just the altitude. It was the distance, the kind that didn't just measure miles but freedom. I didn't land there expecting peace. I wasn't naive enough to think a new zip code could erase betrayal. But I needed room to breathe, to think without voices in my head justifying his actions or calling me ungrateful for walking away. I didn't need healing right away. I just needed the noise to stop. I rented a one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and unpredictable heating, but it was mine. No one had a spare key. No one left judgment in the kitchen drawer. I unpacked slowly like my body didn't yet believe I was safe. Every time I opened a cabinet, I half expected a confrontation to fall out. But all that came out was silence and eventually clarity. My anxiety didn't vanish. It took new shapes. I flinched at phone calls from unknown numbers. I checked my credit score obsessively like it was a pulse I had to keep monitoring. I'd stare at my laptop screen for hours, paralyzed by decisions that used to come easily. Grocery lists felt overwhelming. Emails gave me heart palpitations. I wasn't lazy. I was shattered in invisible ways. But in that stillness, something else began to rise. Curiosity. One night, lying on my mattress on the floor, I found myself Googling how to recover from identity theft. That led to how to freeze your credit, then how to file a police report, then how to rebuild your score after fraud. I took notes, created folders, spoke to a lawyer. It felt like I was assembling a new kind of armor, not just for protection but for direction. The more I read, the angrier I became, not just at Nathan but at how little we're taught about protecting ourselves financially. I kept thinking, if I didn't know this, how many other women don't either? How many of us are out here quietly absorbing the cost of someone else's recklessness, because we were taught that love means covering for people? That thought lodged itself deep. I started journaling again, short reflections at first, sometimes just a sentence. I am not a bank for broken men. Or being the responsible one doesn't mean being the sacrificial one. Slowly the fog began to clear. Not every day. Some mornings I still curled up under the covers, exhausted by the weight of what I didn't deserve. But other days I sat with a notebook and wrote out ideas for something I couldn't yet name. It came to me over coffee one morning. A coaching platform for women who had been financially manipulated, betrayed, or misinformed. Not just survivors of fraud like me, but women who'd been guilt-tripped into co-signing loans, who handed over rent money out of love, who were taught that silence was strength. I didn't launch it right away. I started small. Reading, studying, listening to podcasts on behavioral finance, psychology, and boundary setting. I reached out to others online who had gone through similar betrayals. Every conversation made me feel less alone. And more importantly, more equipped. There was one particular quote from a woman in a Reddit forum that stayed with me. She'd said, "We talk about financial literacy like it's about numbers. But for women, it's also about emotional safety." That line hit me like a second betrayal, because it was everything I hadn't known I was missing. I printed out my new budget on fresh paper and placed it in a binder. It wasn't just a plan, it was my way of reclaiming authority. I highlighted my emergency fund goals, outlined my credit recovery strategy, and listed every financial boundary I would never again let someone cross. I placed it next to the police report and the legal documents. One represented the cost of betrayal, the other the architecture of my comeback. And for the first time I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the background noise in someone else's story. I felt like a woman designing her own financial and emotional infrastructure. Denver hadn't healed me. Not yet. But it gave me space. And in that space I started to rebuild, not just my credit but my self-trust. I didn't set out to be a coach. I set out to survive. But somewhere between creating that budget binder and sleeping through a full night without nightmares, the survivor in me started to whisper, maybe someone else needs this too. Not the pain, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But the path out. The slow, stubborn climb back to self-respect. I posted a thread on a women's finance forum titled, How I Rebuilt After My Brother Stole $35,000 in My Name. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't name him either. Just told the truth. About the betrayal. The panic attacks. The way my mother begged me not to press charges and how that broke something deeper than even the fraud had. I ended it with what I'd learned. That financial betrayal isn't just about money, it's about the erosion of safety and how long it takes to grow that back. Within 24 hours I had over 200 replies. Some with similar stories. Some with questions. Some just saying thank you. That thread became the seed. I built a tiny website. Nothing fancy, just a landing page with a photo of me not smiling, not performing, just present. I called it Debtless Daughters. The tagline was simple. Where financial wisdom meets emotional truth. My first client was a woman named Brianna. Early 30s. Had just gone through a divorce and discovered her ex had drained their joint savings. She said she didn't even know how to log into her own credit account. I feel stupid, she admitted during our first Zoom call, eyes lowered like a kid in trouble. I knew that feeling too well. So I told her what I wish someone had told me. You're not stupid. You're just used to trusting people who made you forget your power. Week by week I guided her through the basics. Credit reports, budgeting, naming emotional triggers. I saw her sit up straighter. Saw her voice grow steadier. I watched her reconnect with herself in a way numbers alone couldn't measure. That's when it hit me, I wasn't just coaching. I was witnessing rebirth. Word spread slowly. Some clients came through referrals, others through that original thread. I didn't promise overnight miracles. I offered frameworks, questions, accountability. But more than anything I offered presence. I didn't flinch when they cried or spiraled or admitted they went back to someone who drained their wallet again. I had been all those women at different points. There was no judgment in me left. My days became full but not overwhelming. I blocked out time for myself, kept therapy going, and protected my mornings like sacred ground. I even started adding a line to my intake form. Have you ever been the responsible one in your family? The answers were almost always yes. I thought I was finally moving past my own story, until an email arrived that made my breath catch. Subject line, It's been a while. It was from Nathan. I stared at it for a long time. My hands didn't tremble but my chest tightened. I didn't open it right away. I logged out instead. I sat by the window. It wasn't fear holding me back, it was choice. For the first time I got to decide when, how, and if I engaged. Later that night I read it. He didn't apologize. Not really. Just said he'd been thinking about me, that he'd hit a rough patch and might need some advice. He ended it with a half-hearted line, You always understood money stuff better than me anyway. That sentence was a knife and a joke all at once. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to Dr. Keller, my therapist, with one sentence, Not falling for it this time. She wrote back, That's growth. And it was. I realized then that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without relapsing. It means you can hold the story in your hands without letting it crush you. I wasn't triggered, I was awake. Alert. Aligned. And proud. I printed that email. Not to keep it. But to burn it later. Not out of spite. Out of ceremony. Out of closure. Because some things don't belong in your inbox. Or your future. And as I shut down my laptop and looked around my small apartment, cluttered with journals and sticky notes from client calls, I felt it again. that quiet truth I'd learned somewhere between trauma and trust. You don't teach because you have it all figured out. You teach because you remember exactly what it felt like to be lost. The email from Nathan should have been the end of it. A loose thread I could snip and move on. But silence, I've learned, is rarely respected by those who thrive on entitlement. 2 weeks later, a call came not to me but to my mother. And then, inevitably, from her to me. I answered without thinking. Just saw Mom on the screen and instinctively picked up like I always had. Her voice was strained, sweetened in that performative way she used when she wanted something but didn't want to admit it. "I talked to your brother," she said, skipping any kind of greeting. My spine stiffened. "Okay. He told me he reached out. Said you didn't answer." "I didn't." There was a pause. And then the sigh. The one that meant here it comes. "Sweetheart, he's struggling. He said he's barely making rent." "That's not my problem, Mom." Another pause. Longer this time. She was gauging how far she could push before I shut down. "I know what he did was wrong," she said finally, carefully. "But he's still your brother." "No, Mom. He's a grown man who committed federal fraud in my name. That's not just a mistake. That's a choice. A crime. And I'm done pretending it was anything else." The silence that followed was different. Heavier. And then her voice came through, small and cracked in a way that might have broken me a year ago. "You really won't help him?" I felt something inside me twist. Not guilt but fury. Not because she asked. But because she already knew the answer and asked anyway. "I helped him," I said quietly. "I helped him when I gave him $5,000 I didn't have. I helped him when I covered his rent, his groceries, his lies. I helped him when I buried my own needs so he could pretend he had it together. And you helped him do it." Her breath hitched. "That's not fair." "What's not fair," I snapped, "is that you're asking me to carry the consequences of his actions, again, because it's more comfortable than holding him accountable." There was the words I had never said out loud before. They sat between us like thunder. She didn't argue. Instead she pivoted like always. "I just don't want the family to fall apart." I almost laughed. "Mom, the family didn't fall apart. It was already cracked. You just kept handing me glue and asking me to fix it." I ended the call. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. And for the first time I didn't cry afterward. I didn't collapse into shame or second-guess myself. I sat in that decision like it was a chair I'd built from my own blueprints. The next day Nathan sent a voice note. I shouldn't have played it, but I did. Curiosity maybe. Or closure. His tone was casual. Too casual. Like we were friends catching up. "Look, I know you're still mad," he began, "but you're blowing this way out of proportion. You'll bounce back, you always do. Just help me out this once. It's not like I asked for a kidney." I stared at the screen, stunned by the audacity. The casual cruelty in his voice wasn't new, but hearing it after everything made it feel radioactive. He still didn't get it. He never had. That voice note became the final proof I didn't know I needed. Not of his betrayal, I already knew that. But of his indifference. His inability to feel remorse. The way he reduced my trauma to an inconvenience. And that's when I understood something I hadn't been ready to accept before. Nathan never saw me. He only saw what I could provide: stability, silence, savings. And when I stopped providing, I stopped existing to him as anything but a problem. So I deleted the message. Not out of rage, but out of reverence for myself. That night I wrote a letter I'd never send. It wasn't for him. It was for the girl I used to be. The one who thought being needed was the same thing as being loved. I told her she didn't fail. She woke up. She got out. She built a life not shaped by apology or appeasement. And at the bottom of that page I wrote, "The breaking point has a voice. And mine finally speaks for me." Denver didn't change me overnight. It wasn't the skyline or the colder air, or the way people left you alone in grocery stores. It was the space. The permission to feel what I'd been too compressed to process before. For the first time I wasn't waking up in someone else's storm. I was waking up in mine, and learning it didn't have to be a war zone. I found a therapist, Dr. Keller, after weeks of scrolling through profiles and hesitating on the book now button. She didn't ask me to relive the betrayal in the first session. She just said, "You've been in survival mode so long, peace probably feels unsafe." And I cried harder than I had in months. Not the kind of crying that makes you feel broken. The kind that makes you feel found. She helped me unpack things I hadn't put language to. The way I equated usefulness with love. How I mistook guilt for loyalty. How growing up being the strong one didn't mean I had strength. It meant I'd been denied softness. She said, survivors often confuse responsibility with love. But love isn't sacrifice. Love is mutual accountability. I wrote that on a sticky note and stuck it on my fridge. It changed how I spoke to myself. It changed how I spoke to others. Tyler and I had one final conversation. I didn't owe him closure, but I needed to practice what boundaries looked like in real time. He called one afternoon, apologetic but still offloading everything onto my reaction. You just seemed so dramatic, he said. I didn't know how serious it was. You didn't ask, I replied, calm and steady. You minimized it until it no longer fit your comfort zone. And I'm done shrinking myself so other people can feel okay. He tried to keep the conversation going. Said he missed me. Said he wanted to try again. I told him no. Not because I was angry. But because peace I'd learned wasn't about fixing what hurt me. It was about walking away without needing to prove that it did. I poured my energy into rebuilding my credit. It was grueling. Phone calls, affidavits, legal letters, and more forms than I could count. I had to relive the violation each time I told a stranger at a financial institution what my brother had done. But every time I explained, the story got less jagged, less shameful, and more mine. I started sharing my experience online. Quietly at first. Blog posts under a pen name. Then videos short and vulnerable about financial abuse, sibling betrayal, and how trauma shows up in your inbox long before it shows up in your therapy. Women began reaching out. One had a sister who maxed out her credit card. Another had a cousin who used her identity for a phone plan. Different details. Same ache. The more I spoke, the more I healed. And when I finally used my real name, it felt like reclaiming my voice from the bottom of a well I'd once drowned in. My coaching business didn't start as a business. It started as a conversation. One message turned into 5, then 20. I built resources, guides, and webinars. I taught women how to freeze their credit, how to read a credit report like a map, how to tell the difference between kindness and codependency. I told them what I'd learned the hard way. Boundaries don't ruin families. Secrets do. And every time someone said, I thought it was just me, I told them what I now knew in my bones. It never was. I still get triggered sometimes. An unexpected number from a blocked area code. A bank letter I wasn't expecting. A sudden jolt in my chest when I hear a voice that sounds like Nathan's in a grocery aisle. But I don't unravel anymore. I observe. I breathe. I respond. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the presence of clarity. And I've earned mine. The email came on a Tuesday morning. I was finishing up a budgeting workshop when I saw his name in the inbox. Nathan. No subject line. Just his name staring at me like a shadow I hadn't fully outrun. For a moment my chest tightened. Not because I missed him, but because a part of me still hoped maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. I opened it. Hey. Things haven't been great. I know I messed up. I need help. Just something small to get me through. I figured if anyone would understand, it's you. You always do. No apology. No ownership. Just the same manipulation dressed up like vulnerability. I didn't respond. I took a screenshot, sent it to my therapist, and closed my laptop. Then I went for a walk. The difference now wasn't that I didn't feel hurt. I did. But I didn't feel obligated to carry it. Nathan had once called me the responsible one, like it was both a compliment and a curse. And I wore that label like armor, thinking it would protect me. All it did was weigh me down while he ran free. Not anymore. I've learned that forgiving someone doesn't mean you let them back in. It means you stop letting them control the narrative inside your own head. It means choosing peace over access. And sometimes, it means disappearing from the version of the story they still try to write you into. I kept the email, but not because I needed a reminder of the pain. I kept it because it marked the exact moment I no longer needed to explain myself, to him or anyone else. I thought back to that night in my mother's kitchen when she said, "He's your brother. Family forgives." He was wrong about one thing. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by behavior. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means deciding your future is worth more than someone else's denial. I still have the credit report from that year, the one that shattered me. I keep it in a folder marked before. And next to it I keep something else. A printed copy of my financial plan. Color-coded. Pling. A document of reclamation. Every woman I coach now gets one too. A plan with her name on top, not just numbers but strategy, self-trust, and the kind of boundaries that say, I know my worth. I protect it now. Sometimes people ask me if I'll ever speak to Nathan again. I tell them the truth. Maybe one day I'll forgive him in full. Maybe I won't. But either way, I won't hand my silence back to the person who weaponized my loyalty. That version of me. The fixer, the pleaser, the one who thought being the bigger person meant being the quieter one, she doesn't live here anymore. And if healing has taught me anything, it's that some goodbyes don't mean the end of love. They mean the beginning of self-respect. I don't check my email in fear anymore. I check it in power. Because I finally understand. I trusted the wrong people, but I was never wrong for trusting. They were wrong for breaking it. And I was right to walk away. If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, your boundaries aren't the problem. They're the beginning of your peace.